The year was 1348, and the Northern Highlands were a place where wolves still ran free, and the old laws held stronger than the king's justice. The Blackwood Pack controlled 3,000 acres of forest and farmland, their territory marked by ancient stone cairns and the howl of wolves on moonlit nights. Lord Matthias Blackwood was 35 years old, but grief had aged him beyond his years. 3 years ago, a fever had taken his mate Elena, and with her went every spark of joy he'd ever known. He hadn't become cruel. Matthias was fair, paid his debts, helped the church, never refused food to those who came hungry to his gate. But he'd become hollow. He'd locked away his heart in a dark room inside himself and thrown away the key. The manor house, without a Luna's touch, had begun to decay. Dust gathered on the carved oak furniture. The tapestries smelled of mold. The kitchen, which once filled the house with fresh bread and roasted meat, now functioned only during strict meal times. Father Benedict, the pack priest and Matthias's godfather, watched the deterioration with growing concern. "Matthias," the old priest said one Sunday afternoon, "loneliness is a beast that devours the soul from within. You need a companion. The pack needs a Luna." "I need no one, Father. I had my mate and the moon goddess took her. I won't go through that again. I don't speak of romantic love. I speak of partnership. Someone to manage the household while you manage the land. A marriage of respect, of friendship." Matthias scoffed, but deep down he knew the priest was right. The manor was falling apart, and the loneliness at night felt like a physical weight crushing him against the cold bed. It was then that fate brought Alara into the conversation. Elara was 22 years old, with a quiet beauty that didn't demand attention but held the gaze of those who truly looked. She was a distant relative of one of the pack's merchant families, an orphan who lived on charity, sewing for others to earn the food she ate at her aunt's table. But Alara had a problem far worse than poverty. Months ago, naive and starving for affection, she'd been seduced by a traveling merchant who'd promised her the world, stolen her virtue on a night of full moon, and left at dawn. When her monthly bleeding stopped and the morning sickness began, Alara's world collapsed. An unwed mother in those days was seen as filth, a stain on the family. Her aunt would throw her into the street without a second thought. Father Benedict, who heard confessions and knew everyone's secrets, saw an opportunity to save 2 souls with a single act. He called Matthias and proposed the arrangement. "She's a good woman, hard-working, can read and write, cooks better than anyone in 3 villages. She needs a roof and you need order in your house. Marry her. You give her protection and respect. She gives you care and companionship, nothing more." Matthias agreed. "Very well, Father. But make it clear I want no romance, no demands. We keep to our separate lives." Alara accepted with her heart in her throat. It was salvation, but also a condemnation to live a lie. She would marry a man she didn't love, a man known for his coldness, and would have to hide her pregnancy as long as possible. Perhaps, she thought with the naivety of desperation, perhaps when the child is born, he'll have mercy. The wedding took place on a Tuesday morning. No celebration, no guests, only the required witnesses and the priest. Alara wore a simple beige cotton dress, loose enough to hide her 3-month belly. Matthias wore his usual black formal clothing. There was no kiss, only a dry, formal handshake. The journey to the manor was made in absolute silence. When they arrived, Matthias showed her through the rooms with the efficiency of an overseer. "This is the hall. There's my study. No one enters without permission. This is your room. Mine is at the end of the hall. Dinner at 6 sharp. Breakfast at 5. I like the house clean and my clothes pressed. Beyond that, you're free to do as you wish, as long as you don't bother me." And so began their life together, which felt more like 2 strangers sharing a train station. Part 2. The Hidden Truth. Despite her fear and constant sickness, Alara dedicated herself to transforming the house. She scrubbed floors until the wood gleamed, washed heavy curtains to let sunlight in, placed wildflowers in vases throughout the rooms. The smell of mold was gradually replaced by lavender, rosemary, and cornbread baking in the wood-fired oven. Matthias noticed the changes. He saw the embroidered tablecloth, the hot, flavorful food, the perfectly pressed shirts, but he said nothing. Pride and old pain formed a hard shell around him. For Alara, his silence was torture, and there was the secret. Every day her belly grew a little more. She wore tight-binding cloths that bruised her skin and made breathing difficult. She wore loose aprons, shawls even in the heat. The fear of being discovered haunted her every minute. Nature, however, doesn't ask permission and doesn't keep secrets. On a humid afternoon in November, Matthias returned early from the fields, fleeing an approaching storm. He entered the hall and found the house in unusual silence. No smell of coffee, no soft sounds of sewing or sweeping. "Alara!" he called. No response. He found her door ajar. He pushed it slowly and what he saw made his stomach freeze. Alara was collapsed on the floor beside the bed like a discarded rag doll, her face white as paper, lips purple. He ran to her, knelt beside her, touched her face, cold and clammy with sweat. He lifted her to put her on the bed, and it was in that moment that the secret revealed itself. Her body, relaxed in the faint, pressed against his chest. The shawl slipped, and her dress, stretched by the position, perfectly outlined the hard, round curve of a belly, a 5-month pregnant belly. Matthias froze. Time stopped inside that room. Pregnant. The word left his mouth laden with disbelief. Rage tried to rise hot and violent. She lied. She made a fool of me. But looking at Alara's pale face, so young, so vulnerable, with the marks of dried tears on her cheeks, the rage stumbled over concern. She was sick. She was suffering. And she carried an innocent life. He shouted for the cook to send for the midwife immediately. When Mistress Berta arrived and examined Alara, she turned to Matthias with the wisdom of one who knew these people's deepest secrets. "She and the child are alive, but she's very weak. She hid this pregnancy with tight binding, ate little, worked too hard trying to please you. If we don't care for her now, she'll lose the child, and she'll go with it. She deceived me, Berta. I married a lie." The priest knew she needed salvation, Matthias. Now the truth is here, naked and raw. The question isn't what she did, it's what you, the most just man in this land, will do with her. Alara stirred, her eyes opening slowly. The first thing she saw was the wooden ceiling. The second was Berta's face. The third was Matthias, looking at her with a disappointment so deep it hurt more than any blow could have. She brought her hand to her belly and realized it was uncovered. The secret was over. "Matthias," she whispered. "Don't say anything," he said, his voice cold as winter. "Not now." Part 3. The Choice. Dawn at Blackwood Manor brought no sun. The sky remained gray, heavy, as if nature itself mourned the broken trust. Matthias hadn't slept. He'd spent the night in the leather chair in his study, listening to the wood creak and Alara's irregular breathing in the next room, keeping watch as Berta had ordered. When the first pale light came, Alara woke. She got up, put on a robe, and walked to the hall. Matthias stood before the window, looking at the soaked pasture like a stone statue. "Matthias," she called, her voice failing. He let the silence hang before turning. His face was tired, his expression unreadable. "You're better?" His voice was the voice one uses to speak to a stranger in the street. "I am. Matthias, I need to explain. I need to ask your forgiveness." "No." He raised his hand sharply. "I don't want explanations. I don't want to know who he was. The child exists. That's the only thing that matters now. What will become of you? Do you want me to leave? I understand if you do." "Leave?" His voice rose with contained bitterness. "And go where? To die on the road with a child in your belly? Is that what you think I am? A monster? I gave you my name before the church and the law. You are my wife. If I throw you out now, pregnant, the shame won't be only yours, it'll be mine too." He walked toward her, stopping at a safe distance. "You stay, but things change from today. You're not truly my wife. You are the mother of this child and the housekeeper of this manor. Nothing more. You'll have a roof, food, and the physician when needed. The child will have my name, but don't expect affection from me. Don't expect fatherhood. I'll be the protector, not the father. Understood?" Alara nodded, swallowing her tears. It was a hard, cold agreement, but it was life. "I understand, Matthias. I accept. Good. Now go back to bed. Mistress Berta said you need 3 days of rest." Matthias grabbed his hat and left for work, slamming the door. Alara stood alone in the large hall, feeling small, but alive. She had a roof. Her child had a name. The price would be the contempt of the man who saved her, but it was a price she was willing to pay. Part 4. The Slow Thaw. The following months were of strange, painful, silent coexistence. Matthias fulfilled his agreement with military precision, paid for the midwife's visits, bought medicine, brought fortifying foods from town, but he did all of it without looking her in the eyes. Alara tried to be invisible. She stopped using the bindings and accepted her shape, but shame accompanied her. When Matthias entered the hall, she left. When he went to eat, she'd already left his plate and retreated to her room. Matthias suffered. He saw that woman walking through the house, carrying a life, and the image of Elena came to mind. Elena could never give him a child. They'd tried, prayed, made promises, but the cradle remained empty until her death. Now here was Alara, carrying a stranger's child, displaying the life he'd so desired and never had. One rainy afternoon, Matthias arrived early and found Alara in the hall near the window, so concentrated on her sewing she didn't hear him enter. In her hands was a tiny shirt made from faded blue fabric. She was embroidering white cross-stitches on the collar, a shirt made of scraps and worn-out shirts Hannah was going to throw away. Matthias felt a tightness in his chest, not anger, recognition of her struggle. She was there alone, without mother, without true husband, weaving with dignity the clothes for her unwanted child. He cleared his throat. Alara jumped in fright, trying to hide the sewing. "Forgive me, Matthias. I'll remove this at once." "What is that?" "Just a little shirt for the baby. I used that old shirt you tore on the fence. I hope you don't mind." Matthias looked at the tiny piece, humble, made of scraps, but sewn with impeccable care. "You have no new fabric?" he asked gruffly. "No. I didn't want to ask for money. You already do so much. Tomorrow I'm going to town. I'll bring flannel and cotton. I don't want this child dressed in rags. Make a list of what you need. Thread, needles, buttons. Don't economize." He left for his study before she could thank him. But that night, for the first time in months, dinner wasn't entirely silent. "Father Benedict asked about you," Matthias said, cutting meat without looking up. "What did you say?" "Said you were indisposed. Difficult pregnancy." You didn't tell the truth?" Matthias raised his eyes. "The truth is ours, Alara. The world doesn't need to know our sins. To the village this child is mine, and woe to anyone who says otherwise in my presence." Alara felt a wave of gratitude so strong she wanted to kiss that rough man's hand. He was protecting her honor with his own honor. "Thank you," she whispered. "Eat," he ordered. "You're too thin for someone carrying weight." The 8th month arrived with summer's heat and the body's weight. Alara could barely walk. One Saturday morning, she decided to clean the high kitchen cupboard. She climbed onto a wooden stool, balancing with difficulty. She was taking down iron pots when she felt dizzy. The world spun. The stool wobbled. She tried to grab the shelf, but her hands slipped. "Ah!" she screamed, feeling her body tilt backward. She expected the hard impact of the floor, but the impact didn't come. Strong arms caught her midair. Matthias, who'd entered the kitchen for water, dropped his cup and ran in time to catch her before she fell. He held her firmly, one arm around her back, the other under her knees. Their faces were inches apart. "Are you insane?" he growled, his voice trembling. "Climbing on a stool in that condition. Do you want to kill yourself? Kill the child? I just wanted to clean." "Forget the cleaning." He stayed crouched in front of her, hands gripping the chair arms. "How many times must I tell you you can't exert yourself?" Then Alara let out a low moan and brought her hand to her belly. "What's wrong?" he asked, alarmed. "Are you in pain?" "No." She smiled weakly. He moved. It was the fright. He kicked hard. Matthias looked at her belly. The fabric stretched, and he saw it, a small bump forming and moving like a wave from right to left. Life manifesting itself. Without thinking, moved by ancient instinct, Matthias extended his hand. He hesitated for a second, hovering over her belly. Alara held her breath. She didn't pull away. Matthias's large, calloused hand landed gently on her belly. The baby kicked a firm, strong kick right into his palm. The shock ran through Matthias's body like an electric current. He jerked his hand back as if he'd touched fire and backed up 2 steps, eyes wide. That kick. That life. For a second. Just 1 second. It didn't matter whose child it was. It was a child. It was a miracle of creation happening under his hand. He looked at Alara. She cried silently, caressing the spot where he'd touched. "He's strong, Matthias," she said softly. "He wants to live." Matthias felt a knot in his throat that prevented him from speaking. He was terrified. If he loved this child, he would suffer again. Loving would mean accepting the betrayal. "Stay there," he said, his voice hoarse. I'll call Hannah to finish the cleaning." He fled the kitchen almost at a run, saddled his horse, and galloped through the fields until exhaustion, trying to leave behind the memory of that touch. But fate had already tied the knot. That kick was the first crack in the dam. The water was beginning to leak, and no stone wall could hold back what was coming. Part 5. The storm arrives. While Matthias rode far away, a conversation was happening at old Tobias's tavern. A strange man with a capital accent leaned against the counter and ordered an ale. "I'm looking for a woman," said the stranger. "Dark-haired, pretty, a seamstress. Her name is Alara. Does anyone know where she went?" Silence fell in the tavern. Everyone knew Alara was now the lady of Blackwood Manor. "An old friend," the stranger smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I have unfinished business with her." Alara's past had returned to collect its debt. Part 6. The confrontation. Matthias learned of the stranger from his foreman, Gareth. "There's a fellow at Tobias's tavern asking about Lady Alara, my lord. He says he needs to speak with her urgently. People have their ears up." Matthias tightened the saddle with force, his knuckles turning white. "And what does he want with my wife?" "Says it's old business. Business from before the marriage." "If that man appears at our gate, Gareth, don't let him in. Tell him to speak with me. No one approaches the house without my order." He galloped back to the manor, heart beating erratically. The true father had returned, and if he wanted the child? He found Alara in the hall, folding the little clothes she'd sewn, humming softly. Seeing Matthias's expression, the song died on her lips. Matthias closed the door and threw the bolt. The sound of metal clicking echoed like a gunshot. "He's here," Matthias said. Alara didn't need to ask who. The color fled from her face instantly. She grabbed the back of the chair. "Roderick. A certain Roderick is in the village asking for you. Alara, he can't." "Did he come for me, or for the baby?" She began to tremble with pure terror. "He said he didn't want it. He said I was a problem." "Why did he come back now? Perhaps he discovered you married a landowner. Perhaps he thinks he can profit somehow." Alara began to cry desperately. "Don't let him in, Matthias. I don't want to see that man. If he takes my child, I'll die." Matthias looked at that terrified woman. Where was the traitor he thought she was? Here was only a mother lioness dying of fear. He walked to her, and for the first time, without it being an emergency, held her shoulders firmly. "Look at me, Alara." She raised her tear-filled eyes. "You are my wife. You carry my name. While you're in this house, under my roof, I give the orders. No one takes anything from here without my permission. Not you. Not this child. You'll defend me, even knowing it's not yours?" "I don't defend the lie, Alara. I defend my honor, and my honor says no one touches the family of Matthias Blackwood. Now go to your room. Lock the door. Don't come out until I tell you." Near 4 o'clock, the dogs barked. A rented cart stopped at the gate. A man descended, light-colored suit, Panama hat, patent leather shoes that didn't match the country dust. Roderick. Matthias descended the veranda steps and walked to the middle of the courtyard, arms crossed over his broad chest, waiting. Roderick entered, smiling with the confidence of someone who thinks the world owes him favors. "Good afternoon. You must be Lord Matthias. Fine lands you have here." Matthias didn't extend his hand. "I'm Matthias. What do you want on my lands?" Roderick's smile wavered but returned, oilier. "My name is Roderick. I'm an old acquaintance of your lady wife. I came to pay a courtesy visit, and I also heard she's expecting an heir. I did the math, you see. The dates match our. Farewell." Matthias's blood boiled. This man stood before him, claiming paternity with a smile on his face. Matthias took a step forward, invading Roderick's personal space. The city man backed up, intimidated by the raw strength of the lord. "Listen well," Matthias said, low and dangerous. "You must have done your math wrong. Alara is my wife. The child she carries is mine, conceived in this house with my blood." Roderick's eyes widened. "But in the village they say—" "In the village they say many things. The truth is there's nothing of yours here. Not woman, not child, not memory. Now turn around, take your cart, and disappear from my lands. If I see your face circling my fence again, I'll release the dogs." Roderick looked toward the manor. At one of the windows he saw the curtain move, but looking at Matthias, he saw an impenetrable wall, a man willing to do anything. "Very well," Roderick said, adjusting his jacket angrily. "But if that child is born with my face, the the whole village will know. The child will have the face of whoever raises it, Matthias retorted. Now disappear. He waited until the cart rounded the bend. Only then did he release the breath he'd been holding. His legs trembled not from fear, but from the tension of having lied with such force he almost believed it himself. The child is mine, he'd said it aloud. He'd claimed the child before the enemy. Now, there was no going back. When he entered the house, Alara was in the hall. She'd heard everything. She looked at Matthias as if he were an avenging angel. You said it was yours. Matthias took off his hat and threw it on the sofa, exhausted. It was the only way to make him leave. Men like that are vultures, they only land when they see carrion. I didn't give him carrion. But you lied for me. You defended me. I defended my house, he shouted, losing patience. I didn't do it for you. I did it because I won't allow a man like that to take what's under my protection. Alara didn't retreat from his shout. She approached and took Matthias's hand, the large, rough hand, still trembling with adrenaline. It doesn't matter the reason, Matthias. You did it. No one ever did anything for me in my life. My father sold me. Roderick used me. You, who had every reason to hate me, were the only one who stood before the bullet. Matthias looked at her hand holding his. The warmth of her skin seemed to melt the ice he insisted on keeping around his chest. He wanted to pull away, but couldn't. I promised the priest, he murmured. I keep my promises. That night, the climate in the house changed. Fear of the stranger still existed, but something new had been born between them. Not romantic love, not yet, but partnership. They were allies in a war against the world. Part 7. The birth. Days passed and Roderick didn't return, but the threat had left its marks. Alara, shaken by the fright, began feeling early pains. On a stormy night, she woke screaming. Matthias ran to her room. Alara sat in bed holding her belly, her face bathed in sweat. Matthias, it's coming now. No, it's too soon. The waters broke. Matthias looked at the wet sheet. It was true. Calm down. I'll fetch Mistress Berta. There's no time. The storm took down the creek bridge yesterday. No one can cross. You won't be able to bring anyone. Matthias froze. They were isolated. He looked at Alara writhing in pain. He looked at the window where water fell like a deluge. He was alone. I don't know how to do this, Alara, he whispered. I saw my mate die in childbirth. I can't save you. Alara looked into his eyes and found, through the pain, a strength she didn't know she had. You faced that man at the gate. You said the child was yours. Then prove it. Be the father he needs now. Help me. Those words were a slap to Matthias's face. He breathed deep and swallowed his fear. He rolled up his shirt sleeves. Hot water, he said, his voice firm, taking command. Clean cloths, scissors. We're doing this. The night became a battlefield. Outside, the storm roared like a wounded beast. Inside, Matthias was midwife, physician, and father, all at once. He sweated cold. Each moan from Alara brought back the image of Elena dying in this same house. Not again, moon goddess. He whispered into the hot water's steam. Don't make me go through this again. He approached the bed and held her hand. Look at me. Don't close your eyes. Stay with me. Hours dragged. At one point, Alara screamed a scream that seemed to come from the earth's bowels. It's coming! Matthias shouted. Strength! Alara! Push! I have no more strength, she cried. Yes, you do. Think of your son. He needs you now. Push. With a final superhuman effort, Alara pushed. Matthias caught the life that slipped into his hands, a small, warm body. Silent. The room went mute. The baby didn't cry. Why isn't he crying? Alara's voice filled with panic. Matthias, why isn't he crying? Matthias didn't respond. Instinct spoke louder than fear. He cleaned the baby's mouth and nose, turned the baby's stomach down on his forearm, gave a firm pat on the back. Nothing. Come on, boy, Matthias whispered, tears filling his eyes. Don't do this to me. Breathe. He rubbed the tiny back vigorously with the rough towel. Breathe, he shouted, his voice choked. You didn't fight so hard to die in my hand. Live. And then, like a miracle, the tiny chest filled with air. A gurgling sound came out, followed by a loud, strong, shrill cry, the cry of life defeating death. Matthias collapsed to his knees beside the bed, holding the baby against his chest. crying and laughing at the same time. "He's alive, Alara. He's alive." He kissed the baby's forehead. He wrapped the boy and handed him to the mother. Alara received her son with trembling hands. She smelled him, kissed him, counted his little fingers. Then she looked at Matthias still kneeling, dirty with blood and sweat, head down, catching his breath. To Alara, he had never seemed so beautiful. "Matthias," she called softly. He raised his head. "You saved his life. You are his father. Blood doesn't matter. You gave him life today." Matthias looked at the woman and the child in the lamplight. In that moment, the last barrier fell. The wall around his heart crumbled, brick by brick. He didn't see Roderick's son. He saw the boy he'd helped birth, the boy who breathed because he'd insisted. He sat on the bed's edge and extended his index finger. The baby grabbed it with force, that tiny hand closing around the rough, calloused finger of the landowner. "Thomas," Matthias said, his voice hoarse. "His name is Thomas. It means gift from the moon goddess, 'cause the goddess sent him to test if I still had a heart, and it seems I do." Alara smiled a tired but radiant smile. "Thomas, it's perfect." The storm outside began to diminish, transforming into gentle rain. Matthias cleaned the room, changed the sheets, brought warm broth. For the first time in 3 years, the house didn't feel empty. Part 8. The Greatest Love Story. 2 months later, on a radiant Sunday, the cart from Blackwood Manor stopped in front of the village church. Matthias descended first, wearing his best black suit, shaved and imposing. He extended his hand and helped Alara descend. She was beautiful in a light blue dress he'd had brought from the capital, her face glowing with health. And in her arms, in a white lace christening gown that had belonged to Matthias's family for generations, was Thomas Fat, smiling, with curious eyes that seemed to want to devour the world. The church was full. Everyone wanted to see. Murmuring stopped when they entered. Matthias walked down the central aisle with his wife beside him. Roderick had left town days after their confrontation, realizing he'd find no opening here. When Father Benedict asked, "What is the child's name?" Matthias responded with a voice that echoed to the last pew, "Thomas of Blackwood." "And who is the father?" Matthias took the child from Alara's arms. He raised the boy high so all could see. "I am the father. Before the moon goddess, and before men, this boy is my son, heir to my name, my blood, and my heart. Whoever touches him touches me." A respectful silence fell over the church. Some women wiped tears. The men lowered their heads in respect. In that moment, Matthias didn't just christen his son, he christened himself as a new man. He buried the past of pain and embraced the future of love. Alara cried, but not from sadness. She looked at that large man holding her small son and knew she could never have chosen a better father. The punishment had become a prize. Loneliness had become family. The return home was different from that first silent journey months ago. Now Matthias drove the cart with one hand and held Alara's hand with the other. Thomas slept in his mother's lap, oblivious to the triumph he'd just lived. When they arrived, the sun was setting, painting the sky orange and purple. The house seemed to shine. Matthias hung his hat on the hook and turned to Alara. "We're home," he said. "Yes," she smiled. "Our home." He touched her face, tracing her jawline with his thumb. "Alara, I need to tell you something I should have said long ago, but fear wouldn't let me. When you arrived here, I thought it was punishment. I thought the moon goddess was laughing at me, but I was wrong. You weren't punishment. You were the cure. You and this boy, you saved my life. I was dead, Alara, and you brought me back." He rested his forehead against hers. "I love you. Not as a contract, not as an obligation. I love you as a man loves the woman who gave back his soul." Alara released the tears she'd been holding since church. She buried her face in his chest, breathing in the tobacco and lavender that was now the scent of home. "I love you too, Matthias. I've loved you since the day you faced the world for me at the gate, since the day you held my hand during the birth. You are my miracle." They kissed not a movie kiss, not a stolen kiss, a kiss of souls that found each other in the storm's midst and decided they wouldn't let go anymore, a kiss that tasted of fulfilled promise. Night fell over Blackwood Manor, but there was no darkness inside. There was lamplight, a baby's soft cry being rocked, and the sound of 2 voices talking low, planning the future. They say Matthias lived to 90 years old. They say Thomas grew to be a just and strong man, caring for the lands with the same love. And they say Alara never feared again, because she discovered that true love isn't born perfect, it's built brick by brick, forgiving mistakes and welcoming the moon goddess's surprises. So if you're there thinking your life is a blind knot, remember Matthias and Alara. Remember that sometimes what seems like the end of the line is just the goddess changing the track to take you somewhere far more beautiful. Love doesn't shout, love shelters. Faith doesn't explain, faith trusts. May the moon goddess bless you all. Until our next story.